You know, I just did that video about jobs and immigration and how there used to be so many jobs in America, and now they're just simply, there aren't any. 177,000 new jobs were created last week. Where? I mean, I don't see any help wanted signs anywhere. Uh, they're all part-time jobs. They're probably, what they do is they take a full-time job and they cut it in half, and then they, say, well, we took 80,000 jobs and created 177. That's the new job creation, by the way. We can take a 500,000 jobs and downsize them and mitigate, make them smaller, minimalize them, and we can double the jobs just by cutting everybody's hours. Boy, that's pretty good. Someday they're going to be at 10 hours, and we'll have 4 times the amount of jobs. Isn't that great? Well, I wanted to talk about jobs, and I got a question for you. I want to make this an interesting video. Back in the day in the 60s, if you're my age and in your 50s, you were born probably in the 50s, and if you're, maybe you were born in the 60s, but do you remember what it was like back then? I'm gonna tell you my first jobs that I had, and I wrote them down about 10 years ago, and I put them in a book, and I just found them. And this will blow my mind. I mean, this really brings back memories of being a small kid in Lincoln, Nebraska, where you have 4 distinct seasons. And when I was a newspaper boy, I remember getting up at 5:30 in the morning, and it was 20 below zero, and my dad's car, 55 Chevy, he'd have that heater going, and we would be rolling those papers, and he'd be helping me out. Well, now you certainly don't want to let no kid go out at that time of the morning with anybody. And anyway, most adults deliver newspapers now, or most people don't even read newspapers because they deal with the internet. Well, how about your first job? How about your first job, your very, very first job? One of my first jobs was selling night crawlers. Yeah, that's right, worms. And it was a real interesting way I got in the business. I was making 25 cents a dozen. And there was a guy down the street. We lived in a mixed-race neighborhood. We were very poor. And there was this black guy. And he had a sign up that said night crawlers, 25 cents a dozen. Well, he lived down the street, and I lived on a one-way, it was kind of like a highway, major arterial, 9th Street. If any of you from Lincoln, Nebraska, 9th Street goes out south by the penitentiary, turns into Highway 77. Well, so I went down to this guy. Now, these black people back in Lincoln, Nebraska in the 50s and 60s, 70s, they were the nicest people, and they still are. A lot of good people in Lincoln, Nebraska. Anyway, I says, hey, what's going on? You got to remember, I'm like 12 years old. 12 years old. I was pretty on top of it as a small businessman. Small business boy. And he says, yeah, he says, there's, those lakes down south of town. So these people are going fishing down there, and I sell 10, 12 dozen worms every single day. So on Saturday and Sunday. Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. And I'm thinking, 12 dozen times 25. I said, well, where do you get them? Where do you get all these worms at? I'm this little country bumpkin. I don't know what the heck. He says, well, you get yourself a flashlight. You go out right after the sun goes down or any time, an hour or two after that. And you turn on your flashlight and you look down, you'll see them glistening in the moonlight. And a lot of them are hooked up like this, so you got to be careful how you pull them. I remember I went out there in my backyard and I thought, my gosh, there's thousands of worms back here. Each one of these are worth 2 cents. I said, man, that will buy me a lot of Superman comic books, buy me a lot of games of bowling, pool, pinball. Remember, I'm poor. So I go out there and I think, Dad, I'm up the street from him. I can intercept all of his business, or at least a portion of it. So I went out that night, got my worms, put them in coffee grounds, put my sign up, and that first day I sold like 10 dozen worms. I made $2.50, and I was happier than a pig in the poke. That was my first job as an entrepreneur. Well, after that, I went door to door selling all occasion cards. I went door to door selling YMCA Thin Mints. Now if somebody comes to your door, you don't answer it. I also did lawn mowing route with my father. He'd go out with me and we'd mow lawns, you'd make 25 to 50 cents a lawn. And let me tell you, the worms were a lot easier. Let's see. Oh, yeah. My very first job, Coffee Skelly, 9th and South. I cleaned restrooms for 25 cents. My dad was friends with these guys. It was, again, some black folks that he grew up with in that neighborhood. My father grew up in that neighborhood back in the 20s and 30s and 40s, in between the time that they put him in an institution and sterilized him. Yeah, that's right. That's a whole nother story. Eugenics, sterilizing people, dysgenics, what we got going on here now, most people can't think. But anyway, then I was a newspaper boy from 1966 to 1968. Now, these jobs that I mentioned, I did them all at the same time. I had 4 or 5 jobs, and I was making really good money. Now, the other thing you could do is look for pop bottles. In Nebraska, they were worth 2 cents. 1965, I went to Disneyland. California, they were worth a nickel. So I would go knocking on doors, people I'd never seen before. There was this little blonde-haired kid, and people would come to the door, and they go, oh, there's this little blonde-haired kid. And I had my spiel, I'll never forget it. Hi, my name's Greg. I'm from Nebraska, and I'm trying to earn my way to go to Disneyland. Do you have any pop bottles that I could take in and redeem to get them out of your house? And most people back then, 2 cents, 5 cents, California, 5 cents. I'd go out, I remember I got 100, 200 pop bottles on a weekend. And I afford to go to Disneyland. My mom and dad, they didn't have much money. Then, when I'm 14 years old, I go to work at MacD's. McDonald's, absolutely. And there was no old people working at McDonald's, let alone people that were making, the rent money off McDonald's. It was just a bunch of kids. It was a happy place. Food wasn't full of GMOs, and they paid minimum wage, but and they gave you free food. They gave you free food. The fries were pretty good. You could make your own hamburgers. I was a shake boy, chocolate shakes. Just loved that. I'd go in and work 3-4 hours every day. I was on work study in school. I think it was in junior high. I didn't want to go to school. I wanted to go to work and earn some money. Well, then I worked at Vine Street Car Wash in Lincoln, Nebraska in 1969. Now, if any of you guys remember the cars that came out in 1969, they were all muscle cars. Go ahead, look at some videos from 1969 on the cars that were advertised. Talk about memory lane. These cars were fast, they were loud, and they'd come through the car wash, and I was a window guy, and I'd get inside, and some of them had those Barracuda windows, those long windows, and they were so cool. These cars, Chevelle SS 396, Roadrunners, El Caminos, Malibus, Camaros, Firebirds. I mean, that's when America and Detroit was strong. Okay, then I went out and we moved out of Lincoln. I worked at an interchange, Greenwood Interchange, and I was pumping gas, and gas on the interstate was 37 cents a gallon. In town, it was 25. And I remember Woodstock. This was what, 68, 69, 1969, yeah, right around that time. And all these good-looking gals would come in these vans, and this weird smelling smoke would be pouring out of the vans. And they'd go, oh, look at that cute little blonde-haired boy. Would you like to come? We're going to a concert out in New York. And I go, I don't think my mom and dad would like that. I think I was like 14 or 15. So then when I was 16, I quit high school because I thought I was too smart to go to high school, which I was. That's a whole other story. And I went to work at Mistley Chevrolet in 1971. And the cars in 71 were not that much different than the cars in 1969. They were fast. And I loved doing dealer trades between Lincoln and Omaha. Mistley Chevrolet in Lincoln, Beardsley Chevrolet in Omaha. And I remember every car that I'd get, I'd want to run it to the max. Brand new car, 5 miles on it, I'd have it up to 120 miles an hour on the interstate. That's before they had, very many cops out and radar. Oh, by the way, speaking of cops, have you noticed all the police officers everywhere? I mean, everywhere. I live in a town of 40,000 people. I see a minimum of 12 to 16 police officers on the road every morning. How things have changed. How things have changed. Look at the prices of everything. Anyway, how about you guys? Have you noticed the changes from the 60s and 70s to right now? I mean, I wonder sometimes what country I'm living in. And I think you should too. Oh, here comes my son. Adios. Please comment. Give me a thumbs up. Might be back for another couple more videos. Might be gone for a couple months, depending on if you guys enjoy my rhetoric. And I appreciate you watching. Adios.